Sailesh,
Hey everyone.
welcome.
Yes. Hey.
Technical
Hey everyone.
difficulties solved.
Yeah.
Zoom
This is
keeps
why.
changing the way they do this every
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. But this should give all the attendees some comfort that hey, technology is not going to take away their jobs anytime soon, right?
That's exactly right. If we can't even get video
Yeah.
conferencing right, like I think we can be comfortable. I was
Yeah.
asking earlier, Salesh, I was asking the folks on the chat where they're dialing in from, and people come in. I always look to see where the furthest person is. And we had Germany, we have Amsterdam, but today it's you from Sydney,
Yeah.
Australia, at a
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy time. Well, thank you for joining. Um,
Glad to be here. Yeah.
just some introductions before we get going. We're gonna keep this really snappy. My name's Amit. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Data People, an AI software company in the talent acquisition space. And I'm joined today by one of the most thoughtful research analysts in our space, Sailesh Hota. Sailesh, you're from the Everest Group. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Everest Group before we get going.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Amit. So, folks, great to be here. Great to be speaking to all of you today. So I'm a practice director at Everest Group. So Everest Group is we are a global research firm. We focus a lot on the global services and technology markets. And I am a part of the team which tracks the entire HR and talent acquisition space, right? So we have 30 plus analysts tracking the entire sort of hire to retire cycle of candidates and employees. And hey, what services, what technologies, what operating models, etc., are sort of evolving. And anything and everything to do with HR and talent is what we are sort of staying on top of. And I lead our talent acquisition research, focused primarily on recruitment services, recruitment technologies. To an extent, I also work on our future of work agenda. So that's sort of a quick few snapshots about what I do and who Everest Group is. And as Amit and I were discussing last week, he's added a few fun things about me. The a previous life.
You're a stand-up comedian now. You're gonna have to give us a couple of puns later in this chat on AI yourself.
Yep,
But
yep, yep. I'll brush the dust off of my comedy muscles and try to do my best.
well, here's my promise to all of you, team. I met Salish and I were, been met at a few conferences, and we've been sort of thinking deeply about the space. And here's the honest, AI keeps evolving so rapidly, and there's so much jargon. I'm actually worried by the end of this workshop, everything we say here might be obsolete already. But the thing that we want to sort of do today is get as tactical as we can and avoid the jargon, avoid the hype. Our focus is going to be twofold. You know, the first half of today, the first half an hour, is going to be strategic. Where Sailesh and I are going to sort of try to break down what are the trends. We've just come off the spring cycle of the conferences and the big releases. What are we seeing? What's happening? And as you think about making strategic decisions about where to invest in AI, what should you think about and what you should be aware of? Now, I'm obviously an AI vendor. Salish is a much more independent party here. But we're not here to sort of sell or advocate a product, but rather try to tell you how you should think about this and what we see as some of the trends that are happening. The second part of today is I want to get very tactical. I want to actually take a single idea, like the kickoff meeting, which we all go through. It's so critical to hiring, and actually use a combination of, ChatGPT, Copilot, the tools that we have access to every day, and see how you can become a wizard in your organization. I want people to come back and be like, wow, did you go to Hogwarts lately? Like that's how, how can we elevate our skills in the very, very tactical way? And as I know from all of our sessions, some of the best ideas come from all of you. You're all practitioners, you're all experts, and we're not here just to hear from me and Sailesh. We're here to learn from the community. So please chime in. Please give us your ideas. Please ask the questions. And at the very end of this, last 10, 15 minutes, we're going to open it up for some networking. So if you want to stay on, please do. And we'll make you panelists and we will just get to know each other. Whoever wants to stay on, just get a chance to get to know each other and talk candidly about the space. So hopefully that works for everybody. Let's get going. We have a lot to cover. So Sailesh, my first question is going to be to you on the state of TA and workflows. At Transform, which was a couple of weeks ago in Vegas, big HR conference, and then the week before that there was IM Phenom, which you were at as well. And there's been a spate of conferences. Every single person is talking about agentic. My God, what in the world is agentic?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one I get asked more often than I would like to. But candidly, if I were to lay it out in layman terms, think about what you were doing with generative AI. I think I have seen folks be a lot more comfortable with ChatGPT, right? That hey, I ask some questions and I get an answer, right?
Yep.
Now, what happens in ChatGPT, and you might have seen a lot of videos about this, not just on webinars like this, but even on Instagram, on TikTok, on a lot of other media, people trying to teach you how to give prompts, right? That hey, if you need a certain kind of answer, these are the kind of context that you need to provide to the LLM in order for it to be very effective in answering your question. Now that's where agentic takes it a step further, right?
Yeah.
So an agent has the ability, and this is on paper, by the way, right?
Mhm.
Theoretically, an agent is supposed to have the ability to understand the context of the task or the ask, right? So you think of it this way: if Amit says, so let's say there is a fantastic agent that somebody has created, and Amit goes and tells the agent, hey, can I have this role to fill? Can you help me with it?
Yeah.
In an ideal world, the agent is supposed to look at the role, understand what sort of, look at the JD, sort of parse through the JD, understand the skills that are required, go into the sourcing engine of the organization. So let's say you're using LinkedIn Recruiter or whatever, Indeed, etc. Go there, pull the pull, I don't know, 50 candidates from the talent pool that you have, filter it down to, let's say, top 10, and then come back to Amit and say, hey, these are the top 10 candidates I've found. And why don't you have a look at that? Right. And again, that is all on paper. In theory, this is how it should work out. Um, and that's where the world is heading towards, right?
So it's
Um,
almost like, if I may ask that, sort of summarize, like it's almost like
yeah,
an agent is like a teammate that's sitting with us in our
yeah.
TA team that can almost like maybe a very junior teammate, but still like almost a teammate with that if you tell them something today, they're not going to forget it tomorrow. They're going to preserve a degree of context.
Yeah, I like to use the term robo butler. Think so. If you were
Robo
Batman,
Butler is a good one.
think of Alfred, right? So
Yeah.
so an agent is supposed to be your Alfred. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
I like that idea a lot. Now, the thing though, it's so confusing is one of the we're all like as a vendor, one of the questions that we always get is like, how will this fit in my workflow? And but the more I think about all of the big changes that are happening in AI, is it's almost like how will you change your workflow to accommodate it? Like, can I take, imagine my current workflow of sourcing, I have an intake meeting, I can do that. I can see the fear where, oh, I'm going to have an agent that does sourcing. Do I need sourcers anymore? And the truth is, you do, but how does the workflow work where a sourcer is using the agent? And does it have to like materially just change the workflow completely?
Um, I mean, maybe not, right? What I would argue is that, so let's think of it this way. There are, let's say, 6 activities that a sourcer needs to do to
Hmm.
bring those profiles in.
Hmm.
What we need to figure out going forward is, hey, if there are these 6 tasks that I need to execute in general, with an agent coming in, what are the aspects of these 6 tasks, or which of these 6 tasks can I offload to the agent completely, right? And
Mm,
which I, as a person, do myself, right?
that's right.
So it's more of division of labor
That's right.
and prioritizing your time rather than it's not about completely
Yeah.
letting the agent take over, or it's not about, you know, um, finding just incremental gains. It is
But I can
about
already see a scenario, for example.
Mhm.
The analogy that I think of is like, it's like if you have a team of mid-level talent acquisition professionals, so with a reasonable amount of experience they're out there, it's like adding a very, very junior person. And
Mhm.
so what it requires you to do, for example, if you're an organization, is start to actually document a lot more. So for example,
Yeah.
you might document, like a lot of companies, we don't have formalized EVPs documents. We may have
Correct.
one, we might have it in the past. We may not have
Mm.
formal leveling documents easily accessible. We, over time, with tenure, a good sourcer, a good recruiter learns it, figures it out, and so information is siloed in people's heads in different systems, in Google Docs and Word docs. The workflow change that I can see, if it's like almost if you bring a really junior teammate on, what do you typically want to do? You want to have everything laid out as documented as possible so they
Yep.
can consume it. Now, this is
Yep.
both a very junior teammate, but also someone who, this is a bot that can consume an enormous amount of information. But we
Yeah.
must have information in a format that they can consume to be productive. And that's a
Yeah.
workflow change that I don't think people fully anticipate.
I mean, I agree, Amit, but I would argue that this change has been long overdue, right? So we
Yeah,
spent the last, more than last decade actually, talking about digitization. I'm not talking about digital transformation, but digitization, right?
that's right.
We moved away from paper at least a decade ago, right?
Yeah,
So whatever you're highlighting is something that I would argue as table stakes at this point and something that ideally should have been
yeah,
happening for some time now, right?
that's
I
right.
think so. So my perspective is that the structure and the approach that you have outlined is something that HR organizations should have adopted a long time back. And I think we are now at a inflection point where there is no way out. We can't keep
We
operating
have to
as
move forward.
we have to move forward.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So let's actually talk about like the maturity stack. One of the things you and I talked about when we were doing it is like, what is the AI maturity model for TA? So walk us through your thinking. I think what you talked about was the first is basic AI, then generative, then agentic. Like how should companies think about incorporating AI into their process?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty loaded question, loaded question, right? I mean, but if I were to sort of break it down, it's two aspects which need to be considered here. One is, hey, where am I in terms of my maturity as an organization? That's one.
Yeah,
And second is, hey, what is the maturity of the tools available out there and what can I leverage? And these are
yeah,
I think that needs to be a balance between both of these things before we answer the questions. So the basic AI tools. So first of all, let's talk about one thing. The three things that we are seeing on the screen here, they need to come into the picture only at a certain stage, right?
yeah,
What that means is, from my perspective, I don't think a company with 100 people or 100 FT full-time employees,
yeah,
they don't need to worry about this because with 100 employees and I don't know, like a HR organization of 5 to 6 people, there's enough manpower, there's enough capability
yeah,
to run things in a much more frugal fashion or a minimalist fashion
yeah.
without the need for having, I don't know, like a ATS which does AI matching, etc. Right?
That's right.
So, there has to be a certain maturity level where the organizations reach and then start thinking about technology, right? So maybe I don't know, maybe the benchmark is 500, maybe the benchmark is 1,000 FTEs, right? But still, there needs to be that baseline that, hey, if I am above the baseline, then I need to start my journey of having these tools inside my ecosystem. And before that, if let's say we are talking about below 500 organizations, that needs to be more of, hey, AI as a sort of one-on-one support or AI as a helper or a productivity optimizer. So think of it as, hey, in an organization of 250 folks, you have 5 HRs and you have given them ChatGPT subscription, and they're using
Yeah,
that largely to, I don't know, to help create like drafts for internal communication,
Sure.
sort of brainstorm ideas for their next recruiting campaign. So a
Sure.
ChatGPT subscription is way like more than
It's
enough,
plenty. Yeah.
plenty. Now, coming to the other half of the market, which is, that so unless you have crossed that baseline, you have crossed that threshold where
Yeah.
now those manual workflows are not enough, and now you need to have proper structures in place within your HR organization. When we reach that, that's when we start with the first category, which is the basic AI tools. Now, if you go out in the market, let's say you are purchasing HCM, right? You're
Hmm.
purchasing some HCM, you're purchasing some, I don't know, ATS, like a Ashby or a Greenhouse or whatever have you. A lot of the tools these days have your standard AI, which is used in matching, which is used in optimization, which is used in essentially making the platforms uh, more intelligent, right? And those are pretty well embedded, right? You don't need to go out of your way. You don't need to do anything separate. So that's where the general basic AI tools of, and which are natural language processing based, which are, standard machine learning based, they are sort of table stakes these days.
Yeah.
The second stage is where, generative AI and automation take a bigger workflow, right? So, so that's where, now that you have established level one, which is, hey, you have all of these
Yeah.
out of the box AI solutions. Then you think about, okay, how can I leverage a greater amount of AI
Hmm.
to bring in significantly more amount of productivity
Yeah.
and significantly more amount of automation within my
Yeah.
existing
Yeah.
workflows and processes. That's where you have, let's say, a lot of the let's say, for example, the CRMs in the market, right?
That's right.
They have that ability to create workflows. A lot of the new age
Yeah.
ATSs have the ability to create workflows. So that's where we talk
Yeah.
about
Or even the scheduling tools like
the
that
scheduling
have
tools. Yeah,
existed for a while but are becoming AI
exactly.
enabled. Like those are perfectly good use cases, right?
Yep, yep. But yeah, exactly. So that those are perfectly good use cases. But what differs is in the second stage, you have contextualized automation or you have contextualized workflows, right? So essentially, you're creating workflows, you're creating automation, which solves problems or addresses issues that are unique to your organization, right? So
Yeah.
this also means that you have a lot more awareness as a HR operator. You have a lot more
Yeah.
awareness as an organization on what my problem statements are. So majority of the market is here, as as everybody can see on the screen. And yeah, and that's where Brett has this question on hey, are we rushing into into things too fast? I think yes, right?
Yeah.
Because a majority of the market is still figuring out the first two stages. I mean, candidly, I still get questions around hey, what can I or how is AI being used in HR right now? That's a question I get from procurement teams, from internal HR teams of mid-sized organizations, because they are still trying to figure out if they are falling behind the curve, they are panicking because there's too
There is
many
FOMO. I
FOMO.
feel
Yeah,
FOMO. I feel like
there's
an
FOMO.
enormous amount of FOMO.
Exactly, exactly. So that's what's causing all of this, right? But then if you look at the third stage, which is where I think the world is heading towards, maybe in a few
Yeah.
years. I don't know whether that's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but there's years, right?
Yeah.
I would argue that instead of automation, I would call it autonomous workflows, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there is a bit of autonomy that comes with agents, right?
That's right.
And that's where I think the Brett also asked a very good question before this, right? Hey, when we create an agent, like Amit said multiple times, is a junior employee. So you expect a junior employee to ask you questions when there is not enough information around.
Yeah.
So that's what we are trying to solve for with agents. So
Yeah.
if you tell agents, if you tell like again, if I tell an agent, hey, can you just check who are my top five candidates right now for this position and help me set up a call with each of them? The agent is intelligent enough. Again, this is all theoretical, by the way, folks. I'm not
All
saying there are agents
theoretical.
out there, but
Yeah.
yeah, all theoretical. So the agent should be able to ask me, okay, where can I find these five
Yeah.
people? Is there a list? Is there a file
Yeah.
with these five people? Is there Are there any particular days which I should avoid? Is your calendar up to date when I go out and make these
Yeah.
scheduling things? It is already aware of it is already aware of what tools exist within the organization. So it has
Right.
already been trained on the baseline capability of the organization. But the technology is intelligent enough to ask you questions because there is a gap in information, which is what
Yeah.
does not happen with ChatGPT. ChatGPT does not ask you questions. No matter what you throw at ChatGPT, it is designed to give you a response. If it's a partial question, it will give you a partial response. Garbage in, garbage out, right? That's
Yeah.
what happens. But that's where the future is more around
That's
autonomous workflow and autonomous technology that, hey, I can just tell the chatbot to do something and it knows that it needs to ask me questions to get the job
and
done effectively.
and that's
Yeah.
hard, right? Even when I think about like the intake meeting, right?
Yeah.
So often jobs are badly written,
Yeah.
but recruiters and many of you on this call are experienced enough to kind of navigate what's between the lines and still find the right candidate because you've got like thing, but that there's no implicit with these agents. Like if you're starting your foundational document is incomplete, badly written, your workday doesn't connect nicely to other systems, there's no implicit, it will stop. And then you've got to get it unstuck every time. And so it's worth thinking about, is your workflow set up to really empower the agent? And it might be. For some organizations, you might be, but you might have to do some foundational work before you can really extract the value of an agent. I, one thing that I wanted to kind of get into with you was how do you make a decision of where to invest in AI? Because these can be costly decisions and these can be not every piece of AI is a great fit for every organization. And I feel like right now we're rushing in with FOMO rather than rushing in with a sense of strategy of what is the problem we want to solve. And because we are data people and we put data in everything, I wanted to sort of take a metrics-driven view of where you might invest in AI to solve your problem. So let's say you wanted to think about AI-based matching. The question worth asking is, are you inundated with applications? Like if you're getting 50 applications a hire, a rec, you don't need AI-based matching. The amount of work, AI-based matching can be like a 6-7 month deployment period. So you've got to believe that this is an enduring problem. So your pass-through rate is sub 0.5%, it's falling, you're getting 200-300 applications per hire. And you've got to believe that by the time you implement it, the market's not going to like be in a different situation, right? Like, am I thinking about it right when I do this, Silesh?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? I think the question is, I think the basic question I would ask myself is, what problem am I trying to solve?
Correct.
No matter what cost it is, whatever the tech might be,
Yeah.
the first question is, what exactly are you
What
trying to
is
solve?
the
Yeah.
But that's always been the case with tech. It's like we've
Yeah.
always the question with any tech has always been, what is the problem you want to try to solve? But I want to sort of take it a reverse direction, which is to say, let's say we're in a world where an org is like, I want to make an AI investment. And it's time to put our feet in the water and like get things. So there are certain standard categories of investments in AI. Which
Yeah.
one should you gravitate to based on your org's unique problem? So AI-based matching is a very singular answer. And I feel like there's a lot of specific interest there today because, oh my God, we're getting so many applications because of the labor market we're in, but will that be the case? Interview
Yeah.
scheduling is another good one. People are really focused on it. This existed before AI and it's getting more popular, rightfully. But the question you've got to ask is, I think there's a lot of thought that, oh, we'll put it in and we won't need recruiting coordinators anymore. And I think people are finding that that's not always the case. So you got
Hmm.
to ask yourself is time to hire going up? Are your drop-offs
Hmm.
becoming a problem? Like, can you solve this? Because as you were talking about, these tools can be really amazing, but they can also sometimes be clunky. Like, will they understand all the implicit, aspects about scheduling in your organization? And so you got to find something that really, there's a whole spectrum of tooling. It might be easier to start with the simpler version of the AI tooling rather than go in the full agentic version of that tooling. And each of these has a spectrum.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I would also argue that something like interview scheduling has actually been around for quite some time because
Yeah,
at Everest Group we have been using Calendly for like 5 years
yeah,
at least, right? And interestingly, what has changed? So if I look at the evolution of Calendly as a platform,
yeah.
now it has the ability to recommend things, right?
That's right.
Earlier it was an integration layer only that you plug your Outlook into Calendly and somebody can just see the slots and book something. But now Calendly has the ability to sort of generate some text that I can give
You're
it
right.
some intelligent prompts, and once something is booked, it also generates some personalized text, and it's also able to recommend certain slots that
Yeah,
hey, look at this, look at that. So some of these things have existed for a
for a
long
long
time,
time.
and it's just that I think with the AI hype cycle, things are just becoming more shiny, right? And
Yeah.
attractive. That's all. Yeah.
But it almost actually, you bring up such an interesting question, right? Is as AI is rapidly developing, you may not need to rush to go to AI. It might just come to you in your existing
Exactly.
stack
Yep.
and improve. And that means that you don't have to like rip and replace and worry about implementation cycles. It just comes to you. So let's
Yep.
go through a few more categories, right? AI-based sourcing. A big question to ask is this can be really rewarding if you are doing sourcing as your primary channel, and not just as your primary channel, it actually is a very efficacious channel. And I look at that as the sourcing drive a 40% plus pass-through rate to interviews. Like is if so, 100%, this is where you should be investing. I see a lot of companies think about AI-based sourcing today where when I look at their metrics, because we're an analytics platform, I don't see sort of that fidelity, and you're sort of seeing them weaning off. It's put the investment where you think, unless you're making just a toehold investment, put the investment where you can think you can make a really big impact. Now, there's plenty of very good AI-based sourcing tools that are just incremental, and those are actually really good. They can be put in right away. They can help you get, surface up better LinkedIn Boolean searches. Those might be great places to start with this. Intake AI, so something like data people. I want to be candid. We don't work for everybody. We have a lot of other features too, but if you're specifically looking at us as AI platform, we would work for some where you have a lot of recruiters and hiring managers. You're trying to deploy Workday, across a really large organization. You need to increase recruiter rec capacity. That's where it starts to really take off, and that's where you should think about intake-based AI. And then finally, analytics AI. One of the questions is everyone looks at analytics-based AI as, oh my God, I'll be able to like just ask amazing questions off it. The question is, do you have really good data sets that are worth asking these questions off? And do you need to make decisions? You don't need analytics AI if you're doing reporting, if you're just trying to figure out how many hires I made last quarter, how many applications I got. You need it if you're like trying to make data-driven decisions with frequency. Are you trying to track a lot of channels? Are you trying to do a lot of that? So I want to quickly get to the tactical section, but I want to sort of just lay out a few questions. I think, Salesh, you already brought some of these questions up in your conversations. The first question when you're sort of thinking about is, will it fit in my stack in my workflow? Like, will it really fit in my stack in my workflow? I think a lot of vendors, even including us, will love to kind of try to make the sale and tell you, hey, of course it'll fit, but you should be skeptical because you might need to change your workflow to make this work.
Yeah.
But, sorry, go ahead, Salesh.
No, no, keep going, Amit. Yeah.
The second thing that I was curious about, like a lot of companies, when we go through vendor evaluations and AI evaluations, right? We're having, I think security teams will do their evaluation. They'll check, is our data being used to train the model? Where is data privacy? Perfectly good. It's really important that TA and HR also own their own risks. And a really good set of risks, for example, is there's AI laws that are specifically now impacting automated screening of resumes. There's AI laws that specifically impact sharing of, scheduling data. There's AI laws that, or there might be things like you think about reputational risk. Like if the AI made a mistake, would it cause harm? Would it create embarrassment? Is it going to create an embarrassing story for me in the market? Like TA and HR need to own those risks a little bit and really evaluate and create a better framework to kind of look at that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where I would urge folks on the call today that, hey, I think that what's going to happen in the days to come,
Yeah,
before the technology hits us, I think the HR world and the practitioners need to undergo a mindset shift first, right? And operate a lot more like how, for example, sales and finance and compliance, etc., have done for a very long time, right?
that's right.
Um, so what's interesting about HR is we sit, as a practitioner, you sit in the middle of a lot of things. You sit in the middle of compliance plus operations plus the people aspect, right? So
Yeah,
the people aspect is something that other functions may not sit at, right? So the COO charter is that, okay, they need to think about operations and compliance,
yeah,
but maybe not people. But then a CHRO persona or a head of HR and talent acquisition, they need to think about it, right?
that's right.
So, and then there is also the entire branding aspect, right? So you also need to think about how certain actions impact your organization's image, right?
Hmm.
So you also need to have the hat of a PR person or a marketing person, right? So
Employer
you're
brand
wearing
is
the
so
hat,
critical.
yeah. So you're wearing the hat of a marketer, operations specialist, compliance specialist, and
That's right.
a core HR as well.
Yeah,
And that's where I think the it's imperative, at least right now, to think about
yeah,
how do I take my team and my thought process into a more business oriented approach. So all of
that's
these
right.
questions that Amit you're highlighting, I think all of these become easier to answer once
Hmm.
the mindset shift is in place, to be very candid.
Yeah. Exactly right. The third question that I would ask is this solving an enduring problem? Like we feel like we're reacting, not only is there a big AI shift happening, there's a huge macro shift, there's a labor market shift. Let's not react to a temporal shift in the markets. Let's react to something that's genuinely an enduring problem. Uh, and then finally is like, what is time to value? And this is one of the things that I worry about the most. There's a lot of, AI tooling that it's taking, even like a fit score with your CRM, it's taking 8, 9, 10 months to kind of deploy. Now that might be okay because you're deploying a CRM anyway. But if you're buying specific AI tooling and the rate of obsolescence that's happening in our industry, by the time you implement an 8 months deployment cycle, will the market have completely changed and will there be like a whole different set of models? And it's worth being sort of worth looking for tooling that can give you value as soon as possible in such an evolving market.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you build an AI workforce workflow. So now in this section, we're going to get tactical. We're going to share some prompts with you. We're going to share some best practices. We're going to sort of give you tools and tips that how do you get going right away. And uh, I wanted to start with firstly, we picked the intake meeting as an example of that. And the reason we picked that is because with most companies, one of the things we saw in our data is 30% of recs fail to hit your SLAs. And almost they take way too long. In fact, they suck up more resources than your successful recs. And almost all of them, when you do a retro, you could pinpoint the failure at the intake meeting. That kickoff meeting between the hiring manager and the recruiter is so critical, but it's so hard to do well. And as we've been experimenting, even bringing ChatGPT into that meeting can be such a unlock for both you in recruiting as well as your hiring managers that we wanted to share some best practices with you that we've seen develop amongst our customers as well as we've tried to iterate and develop ourselves. So let's talk about what makes a really great intake meeting. And we actually did a whole workshop just on intake meetings. We'll share the link in the chat and some of our guidance. But like, it is such a foundational element for your hiring. you're going to want to get a whole bunch of inputs from you, the recruiter, as well as from the hiring manager. What responsibilities, skills they need, what candidate profile, the job level location. We want to get market calibration. We want to understand the hiring process. I've noticed in most intake meetings, we kind of skip these steps. We don't do market calibration enough because it's hard. It's difficult. We don't push our hiring managers enough on the hiring process or the ideal candidate profile. And I want to show you how AI can actually speed some of this up. The second thing that I want to sort of talk about is what are the outputs of an intake meeting? You shouldn't leave that kickoff meeting unless you walk away with some great foundational documents that you can leverage. And even this, I feel like we just walk away sometimes with the job ad and we're done. It's not good enough because that's when we make it so hard for the recruiter to be successful. We make it so hard for these recs to be truly successful, but it takes a lot of work to do a lot of these different pieces. And I want to show you how we can accelerate these pieces with the use of great AI. And for the purposes of this, we've tested this on ChatGPT. We've tested some of these prompts on Copilot, on Gemini, whatever your tool is, they're all very, very comparable. And what we want to kind of encourage today is, sure, you're going to buy tooling over time. You're going to buy it into your thing. But even if before you do it, you should be encouraging your recruiters, your teams to start to incorporate this and accelerate. And intake meetings is a nice, low risk, high reward way of just getting going with this, of getting started with this. So I wanted to ask you now there's one caveat that I'm going to make for you is what AI works really well when you have a strong foundational document. So it works really poorly if you say generate everything because it can't read your mind. And Sailesh, you were talking about this earlier. Like it's like having a junior recruiter. So even if you're thinking generative, like you put partial data into ChatGPT, it doesn't ask you questions. I found the JD to be a really important foundational document, like a really important foundational document. So if possible, let's get that right. Let's invest the time because if you have that great foundational document, it's going to make this rest of this intake meeting a breeze. So let me give you some examples. The typical thing that we do is we'll go into something like ChatGPT and we will say, write me a job ad for like a mid-level account executive, write me a job ad for a Python software engineer, write me a job ad for a finance person. And this is where it kind of breaks down. We did this, we did this sort of, as Data People runs a score on the quality of job ads. And we like look at it from compliance, from, LinkedIn, Indeed optimization, from inclusion, from all of those perspectives. And sort of we did this, we scored out of 100, Gemini scored a 41, ChatGPT did better. It actually added some placeholders, which is really thoughtful. So you could kind of put in stuff. It did 66. Copilot did about 45, which I didn't like that it added a bunch of emojis. So this is, again, I'd say none of them hit the mark in terms of your EVP compliance, your brand compliance, and all of those things. One of the things that so rather than ask ChatGPT to build the JD, I'd say build a great template and ask it for specific prompting for their requirements, for responsibilities for requirements. So a few months ago, when O1 was released, Greg Brockman, who is one of the founders of OpenAI, published publicly like what he thought was an exceptional O1 prompt. And I want to use this format in all of the prompting. Not only does it work really well on ChatGPT's models, this anatomy of a prompt we've found works really well on Copilot, works really well on Gemini, works really well in Claude. And it's basically built into these 4 sections. Your goal, what do you want to get out of this? A very specific idea of format, warnings, like specifically what to avoid, and some context. So I'm going to use that principle in mind in building some really good prompts for talent acquisition. So let's say I want to sort of build I want to start with the bad prompt. Bad prompt is give me some typical requirements for a software engineer role. I put this into ChatGPT and I put this into all the rest, and this is what you get. You get keyword stuffing. It basically puts spits out everything it knows. Now, as you know, as recruiters, if you are hiring a Python software engineer, even if you're not a technical recruiter, I bet you'll see this. You'll look at this and be like, yeah, this is nuts. Like, this is just bananas. This is no one's going to fit this list. And so often, Sailesh, I'm sure you see this all the time. Like so much of AI is garbage in, garbage out.
Yep. And the biggest challenge is that it's a lot of the LLMs are being trained on biased and outdated and under optimized data. So
Yeah,
a average job description in today's day and age, especially with some of the larger organizations, it's like pages long.
massive.
It's massive, and the requirement list, like, hey, who our ideal candidate is, that's like, I don't know, 1.5 pages, and it scares people off, right?
Yeah.
um if I look at this list, this is as a candidate, and I've come from the tech world, right? I have spent 2.5 years, 3 years in tech before coming to this. If I were to look at this, I would be like, hey, am I just bad at my job? Right? So,
You'll be surprised. This is the kind of
yeah,
list that ends up deterring a lot of really great candidates from applying. And we see so
yeah,
much of this. And you get a lot of one-click applies from LinkedIn because the people who end up applying don't read the job.
yep,
And then you as a recruiter are sifting through hundreds of terrible resumes. What are you going to do? Use AI and then clean up resume? Even the AI is not going to know. So
yeah.
I'm going to give you so based on Greg's principles of how to write a good prompt, let's write a really good prompt. I'm a recruiter at a Fortune 500 company that's hiring a Python software engineer for a New York State microservices. So this is the context, the thing. Now I'm going to give the format. I only want 5 succinct bullets. Avoid bold or italics. Provide good formatting as succinct as possible. Avoid using soft skills. This is now warnings. Like, make sure I don't want stuffing this with technologies. I want very specific warnings. Now, you'll see it gives you these what is almost ready to drop into a job description. It gives you a really thoughtful list of very specific market. Like now you'll see this ironicness. Short prompt, long set of garbage, a long prompt, really short set of amazing stuff. And it's almost like you're like, oh, I might as well just write it myself. It takes me so long to prompt. You can build really good templates out of these prompts, to be honest, to make this effective. And that's what we're going to try to do. But I wanted to share this prompt with you because this is a really good thing. Now, this is what not everyone's good at prompting. This is what Data People tries to do with its own, with our generative AI capability, so that what we do is sort of take over and encode your EVP, encode compliance, and then you can iterate with first draft. But even if you're not a Data People customer or you use it today, we kind of get to there. And one of the things that we try to do is sort of really then specifically identify skills and qualifications that you might have forgotten and allow you to market calibrate against how do other companies write jobs like this. Even if you're not a Data People customer, you can still kind of simulate some of this with a good template, with using ChatGPT in the right way. And that's what I want to get at is how do you build the best practice in regardless of the tooling or the product you use. But now I want to get to some more sophisticated work with in the intake meeting. One of the things that I feel we don't do enough of is push our hiring managers on what they want out of this profile. Oftentimes, the hiring manager, if you ask them in this intake meeting, what's a good example of somebody who fits your ideal candidate? And what they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, John did this job and just quit. Let's look at John's resume. And the problem is John's resume has all this other extraneous ideas. Worst is when I see a hiring manager be like, "Oh, John did this job. I did this job 15 years ago. Let's look at my resume." And that 15 years ago, a lot's changed. So part of our job of a really good recruiter in an intake meeting is pushing the hiring manager to make trade-offs, to say what's a good role, what's a not a good role. And I found that ChatGPT, or again, any of these tools, can be really remarkable in driving this. So I wanted to show you how you could accelerate that. So I developed a prompt for all of you, and we'll share this with you afterwards as a cheat sheet. So here, I want to give a prompt. to ask it to generate some ideal candidate profiles of different types. I asked it for 5 different types of profiles that experiences range from small startups to large companies with different types of backgrounds. I gave it the full job ad, and that's really critical, really give it a great job ad. And I'm going to show you what it looked like. I asked it, and it created sort of 5 really thoughtful profiles that now I can present to the hiring manager and say, score them in the intake meeting. Which one do you kind of gravitate towards? And now we can start to kind of probe as to what's really important to this hiring manager. And this would be so hard to do. Usually we'd go on LinkedIn and try to find people and build it. Inevitably, this step always gets skipped in great kickoff meetings. And in 30 seconds, rather than skipping this step, this can be a part of your asset. In fact, after I ask it for these profiles, it even sort of gave me a bootcamp grad. And so allows me to really push the hiring manager to validate what are their preferences. What's going to be a problem? Is it going to be a problem if this person is in New Jersey rather than New York City? Is this going to be a problem if this person has not got fast API experience? Now, I even asked it to generate 3 profiles for the role that might look like the right fit, but aren't. And this is really useful too. Like, is it a problem if somebody's coming in from primarily a data science background, but isn't, or is that an opportunity? Like, should we expand our search to include those people? Is it a problem if somebody's more of a front-end dev, but is trying to break into back-end? This is remarkable because this is where that average data that's all over the internet, what ChatGPT is able to do so well is make it digestible and usable in your intake meeting in a way that I don't think we do enough of and can be really powerful. Salesh, have you seen any tooling try to do this? And I haven't, which is why I'm just using vanilla ChatGPT. But is this how you envision like good operating, a good model to work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned Amit, the events I was attending few weeks back, and this is actually one of the so Phenom announced 25 agents, right? That was their big
Yeah.
innovation keynote this year,
Mhm.
and they do have an intake agent, right?
Yeah,
And the intake agent is supposed to be doing all of this. So the wireframes that they showed us, the demo that they
that's right.
presented, essentially was a sort of this sort of an agent that hey, you go. So what the agent was doing was it was playing that intelligent, let's call it middleman between the
Yeah,
recruiter and the hiring manager, right?
yeah,
That the recruiter triggers the agent that hey, but I need to hire for this. Can you just go and get the requirement from the hiring manager, right? This is what it was doing. But is this something that is super popular? Is this approach something I have seen day in, day out? No, right?
yeah.
Um,
And
uh,
not
yeah,
everyone's going to have Phenom. Not everyone's going to
yeah,
implement their
exactly.
agents. I think before we even expect the tooling to do this, can
Yeah,
we build our processes to do this? Because a lot of this great tooling is already now democratized to everybody. How do we just
yeah.
the hardest part is to get the hiring manager comfortable with this.
Yep.
I
Hiring
love it.
manager, recruiters, delivery teams. I think the biggest issue, at least from our perspective, I think one of the biggest challenges that internal HR organizations are facing with right now in the world of AI is digital literacy, right? It's
Yeah.
just unfortunate, but I feel like HR folks are not as tech savvy as a lot of other functions. So that shift should be actually a pretty good starting point. That if you I don't know if you have a chat GPT for business and
Yeah.
80% of your HR I don't know, your BPs and your line HR folks, if 80% of them end up using chat GPT regularly,
Yeah.
then yes, they are ready. Your team is ready for bigger and better things, candidly.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
We got one question in the chat which asks, can Data People's Copilot, our first draft feature, work directly on the platform to use hiring managers and recruiters to write JDs? I just want to answer that yes. We want our platform Data People will work in Workday, in Greenhouse, in any ATS. We work in hundreds of different systems. Our goal is Your hiring manager and recruiter shouldn't even know data people exist. It should just work. You should be able to access it. You should be able to access your repository, your EVP, and the generative AI capabilities right there. That's the end of my commercial. Thank you for asking the question. I want to talk about the third. This is my little pet peeve. People post the jobs on LinkedIn all the time, and LinkedIn is one of those best sources. You want to advertise, you want to build your employer brand, you want to tell your network, you want to get great referrals, and they'll just take the job link on Workday or Greenhouse and they'll just dump it in LinkedIn. Be like, I'm hiring. You can do better. Every interaction in the market should be an ad. And again, this is something that ChatGPT does really well. So again, we've given you a template of what is a great prompt to get it to do an ad, and you will end up with some really nice ads. Like you can end up with a really thoughtful 2 or 3 bullets about why you should hire for this role or why somebody should do it. Take that extra effort and then give your hiring manager that nice formatted post that they can post on LinkedIn that is an ad for your company and for your brand, not just a link to your job. My final tip for you, and then we'll open it up broadly, is I wanted to introduce you to Google LM, which is actually everyone's very familiar with ChatGPT, but Google launched this really cool tool called Google LM. And it comes with G Suite. If you're a G Suite shop, this is hugely powerful. But what it does is it kind of creates a notebook. So you can upload a bunch of documents. So I uploaded, and you can link it in Google Suites. I uploaded my JD engineer. I uploaded a bunch of documents. And now it has all this context. So I don't have to keep building these huge prompts and repeating myself. And I can start to ask it questions. So I said, based on this job description, can I create 5 really opinionated knock-in questions, pre-screen questions that I can actually put into my application? And I wanted questions that, hiring, let's say you get 100 applications, not everyone fills in these questions. But if people can fill in really thoughtful answers, opinionated answers, that can be an elevation. You can immediately surface up really thoughtful candidates. I think Karni asked the question, what's the tool's name? It's called Google Notebook LM. And we'll put it, Brett will put it in the chat or Aaron put it in the chat. It's a really cool tool. In fact, some of the cool use cases I've seen is people put a whole bunch of emails and newsletters they get into it, and it converts it into a podcast that you can listen to at the end of the day, like a summarized podcast of like your best newsletters. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with it, but it allows it context. And now ChatGPT has something very similar as well. You can create projects, and the projects have context, and you can create like a briefing doc for your hiring manager automatically with 1 click, an FAQ document with 1 click. But I used it to kind of really push it to ask for really short, opinionated pre-screen questions, just 4 or 5, just something that a candidate can answer in 1 sentence or 2. And you'll find that if you put them into your application forms, you could actually get really thoughtful responses and quickly find, if you're not ready to do deep AI-based matching, this could be a really effective way to do human-based matching, but rather than reading every resume, you're reading 5 or 6 thoughtful questions. It's so much faster and it's so much more effective. So I want to leave that tip for you. Salish, you had a point to make.
Yeah, so just one thought with all of this, right? I think, and I use ChatGPT quite regularly in my line of work. I think one key aspect to keep in mind is that do understand that even with the bestest of prompts, the output may not be 100%. What that means is that you'll get a fantastic draft, which has saved you at least a few hours of work, but uh, assume, right? Always assume that the machine is stupid, and always assume that you need to review things to make sure that they are ready to go out, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're
Assume it's like
getting,
the most helpful enemy that you have. Like
yeah,
it's going to help you, but it might try to trick you.
yeah. So make sure that you're double checking and you're utilizing the domain expertise that you have as an operator to ratify and verify whatever has been created, and then just sort of give that final touch before you start utilizing things, and before you start pushing things out into the public domain.
Team, those are some of the things I wanted to we wanted to go through with you. We'll share the deck and the cheat sheets. You'll have a lot more different prompts that you can play with, that you can try with. But we're reaching close to the end of time. I wanted to open up this conversation. We'll leave this webinar open for another 10 to 15 minutes and open it up for questions. Open it up for your thoughts. What's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, tools you've liked, and see if you'd like, and if any of you would like to actually come in and share thoughts, we're happy to make you panelists as well, and have a small networking session if you're up for it. So, but before we do that, first, Sailesh, thank you for joining us today. This was a fantastic session. I really enjoyed how practical you've helped make it, and hopefully it's time for bed for you here in Australia.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Amit. And happy. I mean, it was fun to see all of these, use cases that you identified. I genuinely loved a lot of the prompts, and I think this is a fantastic cheat sheet to get a lot of people started, right, on the journey that we were discussing half an hour back. But yeah, thank you for having me. Honestly, I hope I wasn't a complete waste of time.
You were more than useful and very, very helpful. So let's hang on. I'm seeing questions come into the chat.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's
Mm.
answer some questions. So
Yeah.
firstly, Lacey asked a really good question. What concerns do you have about location or regional laws when using AI? Lacey, that is a fantastic question. We have a New York law that says you cannot use AI for automated employment decisions. Now, the problem is it's super vague without a bias audit. So it has to be bias audit. Now, that's super, super vague. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of EU jurisdictions put in more laws about AI as well. But I think there's also, what I'm really happy about the revolution that's happening is there's a sense of pragmatism about AI. So I think we'll see data privacy-based laws. I think we're going to see, and just like pay transparency, once California, New York, one of the big EU geographies like Germany adopts it, it becomes pretty
Yes.
global and universal.
Yeah. One perspective I would like to add here, Lacey, honestly, is that the regulatory environment right now is sort of going through a shift. The EU Act will kick in, I think, 2026, right? In US, you have a lot of states putting out their own laws. So right now, I think it's easier to target what we call as the, low-hanging fruit. So you have a
Yeah.
lot of these tools and use cases which don't require a massive amount of information and context, right?
Yeah.
A job description generator, I don't know, a summarization tool for your interviews,
Yeah.
right? So let's say so dashboard creators, like you have all these GPT layers doing, taking all the Excel data and creating like nice looking dashboards out of it. So things which are low risk and can provide incremental operational improvements, I think that is easier to get out of the door.
Yeah.
And then, you can wait to see the regulatory environment sort of stabilize before you start making big investments,
Yeah.
right? And big investments are, like actual agents and, here maybe you have generative BI, which is generative business intelligence. You're giving prompts and the
Yeah.
GPT is giving you what recommendations on how to hire and all that stuff. But I think yeah, the low hanging fruit is something that you can start off with right away. And whatever Amit showed today are some of the ways I would argue are the low hanging fruit, like generic questions, which are slightly contextualized to your organization's context. That's a great way to start using AI right now.
I agree. And there's no reason not to, but you've got to figure out, like in the last session we did on AI, I think some of the teams were talking about how they literally did like a monthly AI lunch and learn, where they did things like this, where we have to make it like little hackathons in TA. Like hackathons are a thing we know that happen in tech and engineering, but we should be having them in TA, where you're like, let's work on some prompts together. Let's try some of these things. Let's simulate a great hiring. And one mistake TA does when we implement things like this is we don't involve hiring managers. We don't involve HR business partners, stakeholders. We've got to include them because unlike any other part of our business, TA is like the most collaborative, or part of the organization. We have to bring them in the journey. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. People have asked whether we're sharing our slides. We're going to share some cheat sheets. We'll share the slides and the prompts with all of you. Taylor brought a great idea. He loves the idea of using the AI for candidate profiles. I'd love to get feedback from all of you as to how it works, and then we can maybe iterate on that in the second session, because this is so important. How do you hire? And I think if we can accelerate the hiring managers being forced to explicate their trade-offs in the intake meeting, it just makes the recruiting process so much better. So much better. I think that's we've got through all the questions, but this is, as always, one of the most engaged audiences. Thank you all for joining from all over the world. Salesh, thank you for joining. This was a really fun session.
Yep. Thanks a lot for having me, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. I'll
Have
finally
a
go to
great
bed.
rest day.
Yeah.
All righty. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.